How long ago it all seems. Friday was when that historic judgment was delivered. It was not a close-run thing. It was, on one of the votes, 16 judges against one, inexplicably, the judge from the African country of Uganda. The other was 15 judges against two, the Ugandan judge and the Israeli judge being the dissenting voices. As judgments go on a court that size, that has to be seen as utterly overwhelming, devastating. And although I knew that Netanyahu had said in advance that he would not be stopped by any judgment of any court, because, of course, exceptionalism means that you are, well, exceptional, that laws are for other people. They're not for you, even though your state is a party to the Genocide Convention, even though your state has a judge on the court that is making the judgment. So I already knew that he would do that. But I did believe, and in this I stand condemned, of unforgivable naivety. I did think it would give the Western allies of Israel a pause for thought. I did believe that in Western capitals it would be a very difficult thing, not least in the face of their own domestic law and their own lawful commitment to the decisions of the ICJ, difficult for them to go on with business as usual with Netanyahu, difficult for them to continue sending money to a party that had just been found plausibly guilty of genocide and put on trial and told that within 1 month they must report back as to how they had complied with the 6 principles adjudicated upon and overwhelmingly voted by the bench. I did believe it would be difficult to keep sending weapons. I did believe it would be difficult to keep giving diplomatic cover. I did think that one way that they might approach an adverse decision from their point of view was that they would attack the court. I don't know, call these 16 judges Putin's agents or something. I did think that there was a possibility that they would ignore it, which some of them comprehensively have. The Prime Minister has made little or no comment on this historic judgment at all. The Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, the man that sometimes tells you that he's a seer on legal matters and sometimes shrugs his shoulders and says, well, I'm not a lawyer. One man who is a lawyer is Sir Keir Starmer, King's Counsel, no less, formerly known as a QC, Queen's Counsel. Sir Keir Starmer, the human rights lawyer, has not uttered a single word about the historic judgment of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Now that is truly inexplicable. I did think that the media might just ignore it, and that is precisely what they did. The departure of Liverpool's football manager, Jurgen Klopp, God bless him, I hope he has a long and happy retirement at the end of the season. That was items 1, 2 and 3 on the BBC's website. The London Times, once the journal of record, reported sparingly on the decision of the ICJ on page 34 of that day's edition. It is stunning that journalists and broadcasters can care so little about their professional reputation, about their integrity, about their self-respect, that they can agree to completely ignore a story which is trending, burning on social media, and that hundreds of millions of people are following avidly, hour by hour, hanging on every word that the judges delivered here in The Hague. It is astounding to me that no one in a newsroom says, aren't we going to cover the decision of the ICJ? that no one on the benches of the remaining newspaper offices that we have asks the editor, how are we playing this story? But no, the vast majority of the British media completely ignored a judgment that only the previous week they had televised live Israel's response to South Africa's case, whilst not televising at all South Africa's case. I suppose what I'm saying is that the reputation of Western broadcasters and journalists, already in tatters, is now in shreds. It is beyond a joke that these people can still call themselves journalists, correspondents, broadcasters, analysts. They are professional liars, lying with words and pictures, or merely lying by omission, but liars nonetheless. Thank God you cannot bribe or twist the average British journalist. But when you see what unbribed he'll do, you realize there's no reason to. There's no reason to bribe these presstitutes. They are anybody's. Anybody who employs them can get them to do or not do anything that the employer has decided to do or not do. The last journalist in England is in Belmarsh prison. His name is Julian Assange. Imagine if Assange was still free. Imagine if he was free to give us the backstory, as he so frequently was, about what's going on in the world. But enough, I'm sorry to say, about Friday's judgment. I was thinking on Friday that I could, sing Jose Sikalela Africa. I was hoping that I could talk at length about the great triumph of the people and the government of South Africa. But alas, I cannot, because two vitally important developments, clearly pre-planned, a conspiracy was clearly hatched, that if the judgment went against Israel the very next day, the UNRWA hoax would be launched to take the story in an entirely different and unexpected, at least to me, unexpected direction. Israel claims, that's the same Israel that claimed they don't bomb hospitals, that the Al-Shifa hospital was blown up by a misfiring Hamas rocket. Yes, that Israel. The Israel that said there were 40 beheaded babies. The Israel that said there were dead children hanging on clotheslines. The Israel that said there were babies baked in the oven. Yes, that Israel. Israel claims that 12 members of the 13,000 staff of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, which feeds, clothes, provides medicines, provides schooling, provides all the services on which this refugee population depends, that 12 members out of 13,000 staff members in the agency had participated in the events of October 7th. Now, of course I cannot know whether 12 or 2 or 1 or none of the UNRWA staff members did or didn't. I certainly know I can't take Israel's word for it. And if you think you can take Israel's word for it, I've got a bridge here in London that I can sell you. But in a clearly choreographed collaboration, one after another, of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant countries, the Five Eyes and their pals, immediately on an allegation by Israel cut off their funding to UNRWA, meaning starvation for 2.3 million people. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of pounds over 24 hours was immediately withdrawn in order to make you look over there. Don't dare look at The Hague. Don't look at Israel having been found plausibly to have been engaged in genocide. You know what a genocide is? It's a holocaust. That's what a genocide is. Don't look there. Look over there. At the 12, that's 0.04% of the UNRWA staff were involved somehow in October 7. We're told, by the way, that this allegation came as a result of interrogation of Palestinian prisoners that have been taken by Israel since it invaded Gaza. That's interrogation that has been denounced as torture by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, and by governments throughout the world. We're told, on the basis of an allegation, that we should starve to death 2.3 million Palestinian refugees to whom we have an international legal responsibility, and have done since 1948 in the Palestinian territories and in the Palestinian refugee camps in the countries alongside. Now that would be like withdrawing all funding from the National Health Service because Dr. Harold Shipman murdered a substantial number of his patients. One bad apple, pull the plug on the entire National Health Service. You see how ridiculous this is? And the fact that it went into motion in this well-oiled choreography, within 24 hours it appeared in all the newspapers that had ignored the Hague decision, and all these chancelleries and heads of governments, heads of states, of the usual suspects, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. You get the picture. Well, that is in itself a genocidal act. When you have a legal obligation to provide food and medicine to a captive refugee population, and you renege on that legal obligation because a country just found guilty of genocide alleges that 0.04% of the staff of that agency were involved on October 7th, that is in itself joining the genocide. So the Western allies of Israel didn't just ignore the decision in The Hague. They didn't just attack the decision in The Hague. They joined in the very genocide which the judges in The Hague had just opined upon and sent Israel for trial on genocide charges. Now, I thought that what had happened over the last 110 days was as low as we could go. I thought things were as bad as they could be, but they were not. And it was not. We have now joined the genocide. We are now jointly and severally responsible for a genocide that threatens the life of 2.3 million people, more than half of whom are children. Like we haven't seen enough videos. Like we haven't read enough testimony. Like the judge's opinion had never even been passed. We have doubled down and have joined the genocide. And that was on Saturday. What about Sunday? You see my point? Friday seems like a decade ago. Today, this day, 34 American soldiers were wounded and 3 were killed, and those 3 were officers of the United States Army. Now, that would be a big enough story, and you'd be entitled to say, oh my God, what's going to happen now? But here's a second conspiracy. Joe Biden claimed that this attack that killed and wounded nearly 40 American servicemen had happened in Jordan. The king of Jordan, announced that it didn't happen in Jordan. There's no base in Jordan. There was no attack in Jordan. Why are you saying this happened in Jordan when it in fact happened in Syria? Here's the reason. Because the United States presence in Syria is that of an illegal occupier, the International Criminal Court here in The Hague has already adjudicated that there is no right to self-defense from an attack emanating from a territory that you are illegally occupying. So in order to make a response to what happened today, Joe Biden has to pretend that it happened in Jordan, where the American forces are legally stationed. Heaven knows why, but they're legally stationed there. How's that for cynicism? How do the families of these American servicemen feel about the fact that their president is lying about where it happened so that he can unleash death and destruction in response to their deaths? Oh, and by the way, according to Israel, war with Lebanon is about to be launched any minute.